Welcome back to our SW7 YouTube channel. This one's going to be a bit different. We're not going to go through a whole session. I'm going to go through some of the rationale behind what would be my 10 best exercises if I could only perform 10 ever again. Now, I thought about this long and hard. I've thought about, from my own personal experience, I've been training now for 20 years, also the experience of other coaches I've worked with, clients that we've worked with, what's worked best for them. So I'll go through each 10 and I'll explain why. If there's only 10, it would be these. So come in and find out what they are. Okay, so number one, arguably the king of the lower body. So I'm going to pick compounds here, because if you want to build muscle, you want to really hit compounds. You can go heavy on the compounds. You can hit multiple large muscle groups. So number one, I'm going to go with squat. Obviously with good technique, you can load up the squat really well. Ideally, you want to be shifting some good weight to get good muscle mass. I know there's all these things like time and attention and high reps, but really, if you get strong over time, a byproduct of that will be getting big. So number one, I'd have squat. It's really good for recruiting all your lower body, big quadricep muscles, all your hamstring groups, muscles, your glutes, adductors, involves lower back, it involves so much. So for leg size, I find it's no coincidence that all the athletes I've trained with and my own experience, when you have a big squat, you have pretty big legs. Exercise two, very much a love-hate relationship with this one. If you're a trainer, you will know what this is, and if you haven't done it already, then please add this into your next lower body routine. Squat is a double leg movement. I also want to have some single leg movements as well, so I'm slowly giving away what this exercise is. Bulgarian split squat or rear foot elevated split squat, whatever you want to call it. So I'll demo you an example, but like I said, it's really important to get some single leg exercises in there. When you do this exercise, it's quite humbling, go quite light. When you do this exercise with full range of motion, back knee drops and hits the floor, and then come back up. If you did 10 reps on each of that, I promise you, I've had a heart rate monitor on doing this. My heart rate is going up to 160 beats per minute. It's a savage exercise, so great for building muscle, really good for identifying imbalances between one leg and another. So have double leg movements in your plans and have a single leg. If I was going to pick a single leg, this for me is by far the number one. I'm sticking with the lower body. So this is the third lower body exercise. I've gone 4 lower bodies in total, I've gone 6 upper bodies. So lower body number 3. Now we've done squat, we've done Bulgarian. A leg curl would be great for hamstring, but I don't want to waste one exercise on just a hamstring curl. So I'm going to do a barbell hip thrust. Now, a really good alternative to this would be RDL. The reason I'm not putting RDL in is, one, I'm 35, I've got some lower back issues. I still think it's good to hinge, and I will hinge still, but I hinge with lighter weight, and it's almost now a resilience exercise for me, just so I've got some level of strength in my posterior chain, which is your hamstrings and glutes and lower back. But for building muscle and where I can really push it, I can't really push an RDL now for really going close to failure. I don't want to. Injury mitigation is now my number one priority when designing a training program. So if I can mitigate injury and stay injury free for most of the time, I'm going to be able to train much more and make more progress. So I don't want to do ego exercises at my age, get injured, and then you lose all that progress. So I want to load up my hamstrings and my glutes in a really safe manner, and it's very easy to perform. So I'm going to go for the barbell hip thrust. I'll demonstrate it for you now. But I find this is so good. I've seen lots of people arch these weights up with 200 kilos, and they just launch it up like this, and they come down, right? And it can turn into an ego lift. Think about just pivoting at your hip. So be really strict. You go down. I use more than 40, but this is just for demonstration purposes. And then just pivot your hip up and really tense your glutes at the top, and then come back down. Really think about glute and hamstring. Lower back will naturally be recruited as well, but it's a really good one to load up. And when you lift properly, you need a lot less weight than you think. And if you want this to be humbling, just go single leg. When you go single leg, oh my goodness, it transforms this exercise. And you have to use way less than 50% of what you use for double leg, but really easy way, get a lot of weight on there. You can do high reps, you're not gonna risk your lower back at all, and you can really get some good development in your hamstrings, glutes, and lower back. So just to give a little bit more info, I'll demonstrate what I was talking about with RDL. If I was 10 years younger, I would probably have the RDL, which is this exercise here, without the pad. That's a great one for developing hamstrings and glutes, but as I mentioned, I'm talking muscle building. I wouldn't really want to put a client at my age doing an RDL for between 6 and 12 reps, getting really close to fatigue, because as soon as you lose that shape in your lower back, like I say, you're risking injury. So I think it's much easier to load a barbell hip thrust. But If I was working with someone who was younger, more resilient, who doesn't have a history of lower back, then I would probably lean towards RDL, but for me, I'm going barbell hip thrust. Number 4, so far, like squat has been very vertical, Bulgarian's vertical, I want to get some sort of horizontal work in. Sled, I love the sled, and the reason I love the sled is you can load it up heavy for strength, you can put it a bit light, do some quicker power stuff as well, but particularly for muscle building, you can stick 20, 30 meters on this as a single rep, so that would be 3 lengths of this gym, just turn it around, and it absolutely blows up my quads. And like I say, it works your calves as well, so you get some lower body in there by keeping a stiff ankle. So absolutely love a sled. If you do this for high reps, the lactic that you feel is absolutely insane. Again, very safe on the lower back. It means you can take your legs to absolute failure without compromising your spine or your body shape at all. Really easy to keep good form, not putting a load of weight through your back. So it's a really safe one to load up, try and get some muscle on those lower body. Uppers. So now we're going to go through the 6 upper bodies. So I'm going to look at a horizontal push. The options are bench press or dumbbell press, really. Machine press is a great exercise as well, but I'm going to go with dumbbell. Bench press I often find can niggle my shoulders a bit more. It's harder to manipulate your wrist positioning, your elbow positioning. I like to keep my wrists a bit more neutral and my elbows tighter, I'll show you now. With a barbell, if your elbows are out at 90 degrees to your torso, you don't really want that. You want your elbows in a bit. You can do that on a bench, but it's harder. So you can see now the dumbbells are at a 45-degree angle to myself. My elbows are a little bit tighter. So it's much easier to manipulate that movement. Second reason I like dumbbells as well is, say you've got a pre-existing niggle. If you're doing barbell all the time, you don't know, but maybe your right arm is lifting 52% of the weight and your left arm is lifting 48% of the weight. You have a dominant arm. And some of you might be thinking and resonating with that, thinking, oh yeah, my left arm goes up much quicker than my right arm. So with dumbbells, because you're using your limbs independently of each other, it gets rid of any imbalances. So it makes sure that you have good balance across your upper body. Like I said, it's much easier you don't have to go full depth as well. So I find it's just shoulder friendly. It works your arms independently of one another. And it's a really good exercise for building that chest and front of your shoulder. Okay, so we've got some horizontal pressing to kick us off with our upper body. Now you want some vertical pressing. So just in case you're fairly new to training, horizontal presses obviously works chest and triceps, predominantly chest, but triceps obviously massively recruited. Vertical pressing, we're now moving the focus towards our deltoids. So I want to get a vertical press in. So for this, for the same reasons as chest press, you can do a barbell shoulder press, but I'm going to use dumbbells again. Like I said, easier to manipulate your elbows and wrists, and it's working your levers independently of one another. So for a vertical press, and to focus on growing my shoulders, I'm always going to pick a dumbbell shoulder press. That would be my shoulder exercise. Yes, some of you are thinking, why don't I do lat raises? Yeah, lat raises is a great delt exercise, but if I've already got 10 to pick, and I want to kill 2 birds in 1 stone, I'm going to get some tricep recruitment in pressing overhead as well. So that's the reason I've gone for shoulder press. I am going to obviously work my deltoids at the same time. I might get more concentrated delt recruitment by doing lateral flies, but if I've only got 1 to pick, I'm going to go with the overhead press. Now we're going to go on to some pulling movements. Similar thing as your chest and your pushing movements. I want horizontal pulling movements where I'm pulling in this plane, and I want vertical pulling movements when I'm pulling down. So if I'm going to think of a horizontal movement, I've got 2 that I want to pick. And I get big arm recruitment in these as well. So number 1 is going to be a single arm dumbbell row. There's many ways you can dumbbell row. You can have your knee on the bench, you can have a split stance off a bench, you can have a square stance off a bench, do whatever you like. If you go square stance, it uses a lot more of your hips because you've always got to keep your hips square. So maybe if you're starting off with this, just put 1 knee, 1 arm on the bench. You can keep your elbow quite tight if you want to recruit your lats, or you can also flare your elbow quite wide. And when you do that, and you come in more in this sideways plane as opposed to pulling your elbow tight, pulling tight is a bit more lat, pulling wide and up works upper back as well. So a really nice exercise you can manipulate to work a little bit more lower back and lat, or put your elbows wide and work a little bit more of your upper back where you're going rear delts, traps, things like that. I really believe in this. Every program should pull more than you push. If you're reflecting on your training program and you do a lot of pushing and not much pulling, if you don't already, you'll probably start experiencing some shoulder pain. So you should pull more than you push, which is why I've gone for another horizontal pull exercise. This is the prone pull. Some gyms don't have this. If you don't have a prone pull, do you know what, follow me this way, then the replacement would be this one. I'll pop this bench up. But with two hands, I just lean on the bench. You're at a bit more of a 45-degree angle, but you could do a dumbbell row like this. No pressure on your lower back. Yes, you have things like pendlay rows, you got bent over rows. I personally don't like loading up my lower back when I'm doing rows because I find the lower back becomes the limiting factor to lifting more weight. So I love a chest supporter because it means I can just really focus on using my arm and back muscles. And prone pull is my personal favorite for exactly the same reasons. So if your gym doesn't have one of these, then use a dumbbell chest supported row. But if you are lucky enough to have a prone pull, like I said, horizontal movement, similar to single arm row, but we're using double arm now with the barbell. It's almost the bang opposite to a bench press, and you just row up horizontally. Don't try and come up like a seal and involve your lower back. You want to keep your chest flat on the bench and just strictly row up horizontally towards your chest. Brilliant exercise, and the same thing as the dumbbell row. You can keep your elbows tight for a bit more lat recruitment, or you can have elbows quite high and work more of your upper back. So you can manipulate your elbow positioning depending on what part of your back you want more development. I'm gonna go a third pulling movement, and you'll notice now, right Sam, we've done two horizontals, we haven't done a vertical. This is a tight toss up between like a lat pull down, close grip pull down, or chins. I'm gonna cheat a little bit, chin slash pull up. So obviously you've got overhand grip and you've got underhand grip, you've got neutral grip. So let's just hog it and have all three. If you go wide grip, this is going to be predominantly, it will work, all these things will work your back and your biceps, but depending on your grip, it will slightly focus and move and shift along the continuum towards slightly different muscle groups. But in the whole, all of these work biceps and back. But if we go wide grip, it's going to be a bit more lat recruitment, a little bit less bicep recruitment. If we go like almost a supinated grip, which means where your wrists are turned in like this, that's suddenly going to mean there's going to be a lot more bicep recruitment than lat. You still work both, but obviously more emphasis on the biceps. And then you've got somewhere in the middle, which is if you use a neutral grip. So my vertical pull is going to be chin up, pull up, because I can manipulate the wrist positions to work on different aspects of my back or my biceps, depending on what I feel like for well-rounded back and arm development. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, Sam, you've got 10 exercises, you've got no bicep curl, you've got no triceps. The reason is, and as I mentioned on the chin, I get a shed load of bicep recruitment from doing close grip chins. And I find that I actually don't need to do much more isolated bicep movements to grow big arms. The amount of weight that goes through your arms when you're doing a weighted close grip chin is enormous. So I get my biceps out of that. And obviously you use biceps a lot on all your pulls. Similarly with triceps, I'm not going to waste an exercise on triceps. If I was allowed 11 or 12 exercises, I might add in a bicep curl and a tricep extension. This is my 6th final upper body and the 10th exercise overall. It's going to be a weighted press up. Now, the reason I like this is it looks really difficult. It's really easy to put a plate on your back, and it's really easy to unload as well. So you want to wiggle it down a little bit. But similar thing here, I find you get multiple benefits from this. One, I find it shoulder friendly because you can manipulate your shoulders to keep them tighter like this. And if you keep them tighter, you can also get big tricep recruitment. You can almost go like quite a narrow grip. Keep those elbows nice and tight. It's a big tricep movement. So you can put your elbows a little bit wider, put your hands wider, flare your elbows a little bit to get a little bit more chest focus and anterior deltoid, anterior just meaning at the front. And also, if you're doing this for like 15 reps, for example, you're in a plank position for around 30 to 45 seconds. It's a big core move as well. So you kill 3 birds in 1 stone. Big triceps, big chest, a lot of core recruitment. Fold it off really easy like that. So that would be my 6th and final exercise. Now, I want to give some honourable mentions to some of the contenders who didn't make it. Bicep and tricep, I find, obviously that's naturally what people want. If I could, I'd do a single arm bicep curl, and also I would do personally for triceps, I like a cable extension. But research does suggest that if you train muscles in a lengthened position, so if I'm doing triceps overhead and you're doing extensions this way, the science suggests that you get better muscle growth doing that. So I'd include some of those variations if I was going to just pick some isolations. Leg extension was very close. I would love to sit down and just bang out a leg extension at the end of all my lower body sessions. It's so good for isolating the quad. I get nothing isolates my quad just like that, but it's a tricky one if you've only got 10 exercises. So honorable mention for the single leg extension. And also with core, I haven't added designated core exercise because obviously when you're doing a Bulgarian split squat, it requires a lot of balance. You are using your core a lot when you squat, when you split squat, and also when you're doing the press up as well, because it's kind of like a plank movement. So that's why I haven't put in maybe some isolated core type activities. Thanks for watching again. I hope you enjoyed. What we would love is put in the comments below what type of content you'd like to see. This sort of coaching content we want to give a little bit more of. So number one, let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with some of those exercise selections, and let us know what you think you might have missed out on. And number two, any other ideas of episodes that you want us to do. We're going to be producing this content way more regular. So let us know in the comments and we can produce you no problem. Thanks for checking us out again. Thanks for the support, and we'll see you next week.